Hey guys, and welcome to Beating the Press podcast, your weekly podcast where we talk all things football. Today we're continuing our journey through the European Championships and we are reviewing Euro 2016, which was held in France. Many of you may remember Euro 2016 like me as an England fan, England v Iceland, or maybe you remember it as Cristiano Ronaldo winning his first international tournament, but this was actually a tournament which featured four of our home nations, in particular the Welsh, who took part in their first major tournament in 57 years, who, without giving it away, did slightly better than England. So to look through this, we're joined by a special guest today who's hopefully going to give us a little bit of an insight into the Welsh perspective of the tournament. If you're new around here, this is the 6th European Championships review that we've done, so feel free to check them out. I'm going to leave a link somewhere in the video, so just click on that. You can look through them all. Brilliant content, even though we say it ourselves. So while you're there, just subscribe for more content like this. So with that out the way, I'm Christian. This is my co-host, Ty. He's our Italian, I was going to say Italian stallion there, Italian fan, Italian expert. We're also joined by Simpson, who is the CEO and founder of Reggae Boy Gaming. And last but not least, we're joined by our special guest and resident Wales fan, Andy. Welcome, Andy. Thanks for joining us, pal.
Thanks very much. It took me all of about half a second when he asked me if I wanted to come on and talk about Euro 2016. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Many of you may be wondering why Andy hasn't got a Welsh accent.
Question one. Are you sure he's Welsh?
Yeah. It's the same reason why Ty doesn't have an Italian accent, though.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Ty assures me he's been verified as an actual Welsh supporter. Yeah. So, Ty, you want to introduce him and just let us know how you know him?
Yeah, so I work with Andy and we've had conversation before. You know, he's a Swansea fan and he's a Welsh fan. And when we were doing the Euros, I thought, do I know anyone who's Welsh? Oh yeah, I do. And then we just sort of said, has he got an accent? Nah, he hasn't. But he says he's Welsh. We'll believe him. And he's got a Welsh chop as well, as you can see. So
I've got some others. If you want me to sort of go through the repertoire as we go on, you know, and it'll make a bit more editing, but it might give more authenticity.
I think for any authenticity, if anyone doesn't believe us, just check out Andy's Twitter. You'll just see full of Swansea and Wales, so he's completely Welsh.
My Twitter header is me. Went to Budapest a couple of years ago for a Euro 2020 qualifier, and we were just sort of strolling around Budapest and bumped into Joe Allen, Sam Vokes, Neil Taylor, kind of heroes of Euro 2016. So I wasn't in my best physical shape, if I'm being honest. So it's not the picture, but yeah, it was good to bump into a few of the heroes from this tournament in the streets. So, yeah.
Yeah, so also obviously want to thank Simpson. Come a bit of a regular appearance on our. Yeah, so we've got Jamaica, we've got Wales, we're going global.
It's it.
Beating the press. Yeah, so Andy, obviously you probably watched a few of our shows before, hopefully. And we have like a set format which we like to go through. Obviously, we start off with England squad, and then we like to move on to England's demise, and then the knockout stages, the final team of the tournament, and top goal scorers. So with that being said, we will move on to the beginning. It's just your first thoughts on your expectations of Wales before the tournament started.
Genuinely didn't have any, and that sounds like a really, we went there and I went to all three group games, went out there for the first 10 days and kind of thought, well, the likelihood is that will be our tournament. I remember tweeting from the first game, such is the way, and said, plenty of hope, but no expectation. And me and my brother were talking about it in the sort of day before, the night before in Bordeaux. And we generally said to each other, what, if we see us score a goal, and it means something, we're not 4-0 down. When you look now and go, we're into the semi-final, of course you've got Bale in your team and people like that. We wanted to see a goal and it means something. And then we just, that kind of joyous experience of having no pressure that the likes of England do and no expectations. And I think that the squad played like that through the tournament as well. So, just the best month of my life, to be fair. And I've not had children, and I've not been married, so I don't have to sort of go give that caveat. So as a football fan who grew up and went through many dark days, as a Welsh fan, where it often felt like national service watching us play football, it was just an incredible experience.
I think just to sort of back you up there, and an alternative view, if you did have kids and you weren't married, that would still be your best day. And that's speaking from some experience. If my country were there and I managed to get there to a major tournament and some tickets, that'd be my best day of my life. Sorry, kids and wife, but that's the shit. You
can tell Ty's missus doesn't watch our podcast.
I was going to say my girlfriend might listen, so I thought I better say that. But
definitely, if my missus is in birth during the World Cup final, she's doing the breathing technique on her own. I don't care. I'm bringing in the TV into the room. I don't care.
So obviously, first we want to go through the England squad. There was a few retirees from the 2014 World Cup. Just for prosperity, we actually got knocked out. It was our worst actual performance in any World Cup finals, where I don't think we even got a single win in under Roy Hodgson. So I don't believe we're going into this with much confidence. And for the listeners at home, Ty, do you mind going through the England squad?
Yeah, so it was I'm looking through the squad now, and I'm struggling to find a different word than shit, but that's exactly what it was. So I'll go through it. Anyway, we've got Joe Hart, Kyle Walker. We'll go through keepers: Joe Hart, Tom Heaton, and Fraser Foster. Defenders were Kyle Walker, Danny Rose, Gary Cahill, Chris Smalling, Nathaniel Klein, John Stones, and Ryan Bertrand. Midfielders: Milner, Raheem Sterling, Lallana, Jordan Henderson, Eric Dyer could obviously play at the back as well, Jack Wilshere, Ross Barkley, Dele Alli, and then the forwards were Harry Kane, Wayne Rooney. It's weird seeing Wayne Rooney on an England team. Jamie Vardy, Daniel Sturridge, and Marcus Rashford.
So, Simpson, thought?
First of all, like, the average age isn't that bad when you look at it, really. And probably what's going on in England at the time, that is probably the peak that we've got at the time. But, I mean, looking at it, really, yeah, we did a crap World Cup before, but looking at that, the average age ain't that bad. And to be fair, there's still 2 or 3 players there that will be kicking around in the next Euros, to be honest. Hopefully not Eric Dyer, let's be fair. Unless he's driving the bus. Other than that, I wouldn't bite the brother. But, I mean, you've got experience there with Milner, a little bit with Klein and Rooney, and even Vardy's first tournament, but I think we're relying on Vardy to back up Kane. I mean, Kane's 22. It's mad to think that he's 22 there, to be fair. Mm-hmm. Rashford's 18 as well. But, I mean, looking at that, I mean, on paper, I think not too bad. But then when you look at the other teams like France and Belgium, then you realise, if we get quarterfinals, we'll be lucky, do you know what I mean? But, Smaldini at the back. What else do you expect, to be fair?
I mean, I'm looking at that team and that squad, and I'm thinking there's a lot of average players. Compare that to where we are now and the pool of players that England have got to choose from, and there'll be some really good players that don't make the squad. And you look at, I mean, I don't want to sort of look at the keepers, but you got Tom Heaton, he's not going to be anywhere near. You got Ross Barkley, Dele Alli. Eric Dyer, I mean, if he even goes, Klein. I mean, how was Klein? He's had some drop off. Lallana, Smalling is not getting a sniff now. Gary Cahill's obviously, he's coming towards him. Milner's sort of coming, and then Rose. I mean, that's like pretty much half your squad. I'd imagine that's not going to be anywhere involved. And there was a thing with Roy Hodgson as well. He was really sort of stubborn in his way, and the players that he picked. You compare that to the 2014. There's not a huge amount of differences. And there was still an over-reliance on Rooney. And then it's like I said, Ami said that there are some really good players. There's probably about 4 or 5 that you think, good solid players that are going to move on to this sort of Euro 2021 as well. But looking back, I mean, obviously Iceland beat them, and I that when the knockout says, and I actually think they probably got to where their quality deserved, and allowed them to get to, they shouldn't really have got much further. And just one other thing before I sort of pass on, this was the first European Championships where they'd increased numbers. So there were 24 teams, which allowed teams like, no offence, Andy, Wales, Northern Ireland, Iceland, do you know what I mean? The sort of mid-tier teams that wouldn't normally have an opportunity to play in a major tournament. And that's so you sort of expect England should have got to sort of quarterfinals by default without even trying too hard. And
So that's the English arrogance, isn't it? Again, though,
Yeah.
that's the arrogance of England with that straight away. But the one thing I'm looking at is you look at them players, and there's only really Rashford, Kane, Sterling. You're talking 3 or 4 that have kicked on and improved. Dele Alli's gone backwards. Let's be fair. The rest of them have as well. Vardy stayed the same, I'd say, but he was already 29. But there's not many that are below 25 or 26 that have kicked on. Henderson's kicked on. But you're talking 4 out of like 24 players there that have kicked on and improved.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you're right there. Like, there's only like maybe 4 or 5 that would actually get into the current England squad, as Ty mentioned. Andy, your thoughts, waiting patiently there?
You go through that list, and there's nothing. No one jumps out at you. No, I remember the Wales England game. I think he played Rooney as almost a deep line midfielder from memory. I've tried to erase most of that game from my memory, if I'm being honest. But yeah, there wasn't. Don't look at that and go, that's a team that's going to be competing. I think you mentioned an expectation for England to do well in tournaments, but from the Euro '96, when was the last time they were in a major semi-final?
Yeah, it's very unrealistic.
The English press, maybe less so than or more so than the public, rather expect England to do well, but they're not in terms of football heritage. Yes, but they weren't around the final latter stages of tournaments for a long time going into that, and perhaps that was the kind of culmination of maybe 20 years of sort of underperformance, perhaps.
That's 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years.
Andy, I've got a question for you. So, how do Welsh people and how do the Welsh press sort of think of England when they're approaching, when they're going to a major tournament? Do they think they're just not going to get very far? They're very arrogant. What's their sort of thoughts and views?
I think we have a bit of a more realistic look at it when you think about the English press, you naturally think of the tabloids, don't you? And what they're saying, or how they big up the players and the squad sometimes beyond what's there. And I think they also set them up to fail. I think this squad, like you said, there's quite a lot of inexperience in there in terms of tournament experience, but you kind of know going in that there's this prize coming before a fall, that England are not going to live up to the expectations that are perhaps set by the press and perhaps the more casual football fan. Yeah. I think, you look at you guys who would, watch football and take a closer look at it, would probably, like we said earlier, you said already, probably got to where they perhaps should have got through Iceland and got to a quarter-final. But you wouldn't have expected that England team to go and compete with the bigger nations and actually get through to a last four or even a final. So I think that the wider football public, understands where England were at that time, and kind of knows that it's usually a penalty shootout that's going to be your undoing. If we're being honest.
Like Andy said with the tabloids, as soon as, like I said, they'll put the pressure on one like a Rooney or put pressure on it. As soon as that one player gets injured, usually happens, one of them gets injured like Kane or somebody gets injured a month before, that's it, we can't win it. The press even say, one player goes down, they forget the rest of them. So you imagine being a player in that squad, and you're thinking, like Wales. Wales did it in a team effort. Yes, they had Gareth Bale, but they had Ramsey and they had Williams. They did it as a team. Same with Iceland. As soon as one of our top 3 players gets injured, that's it. The press are like, no, they're not going to do anything. And to be fair, we kind of believe them as well. And we're kind of praying. I remember when Wayne Rooney broke a metatarsal, we're all touching a newspaper trying to make
prayer mass.
You know what I mean? It's like the one player gets injured and the press even say, no, we can't do it. There's never a whole team ethic thing with England. We always are relying on that talisman. Like we've got a Pele every time or something, forgetting that there is other players around.
Absolutely. I'm just looking, just before we move on, the squads that people are playing for. Obviously, we've seen a lot of Manchester City, Man United, but there was quite a bit of a representation from Tottenham as well, like an inspiration from Tottenham, and also the top teams. And again, moving on to the Wales squad, there's no disrespect here, but if we just look comparatively to some of the names that you read in there, obviously you're seeing the likes of Milton Keynes, Gillingham, Inverness, Swansea.
Sorry, Andy.
Sorry, Andy.
Robson can't do it. Have a team, did he?
No, exactly. And we look at our squad now. When you process the depth of our squad, 5 years on is much better. But there's players there. I was looking at who we brought on in a couple of games, and Simon Church. Do you know what I mean? We talk
Take
about
them to church.
You know, we had a good starting 11 that could hold their own against, you know, most teams in the tournament, and then a couple of players who you could rely on to come in and maybe do a bit of a job, but we're never going to kind of come on and win you a game or turn you a game. And the rest, like you say, are championship players, probably not even regular championship players or top half championship players. But I think when you talk about team ethic, and you mentioned how England perhaps never, you know, there's expectations with England and getting the best players into the team. This team was created for 3 or 4 years, and the spine of it was strong and consistent. And when they're playing, we fancied our chances of getting a result against almost anyone. You know, we had the best defensive record, I think, of any team in the qualifying. We knew we were strong at the back, and Coleman played to those strengths. You know, the champ Coleman had a dream, and it was to play with 5 at the back and Bale in attack. And that's how it came about. So yeah, our starting 11 was good, but beyond that, you look and you go, there's nothing there to get.
We've mentioned before though as well with Andy, with that one thing I did loved about the Welsh in that is like Coleman was always positive. No matter what he spoke, he was always positive. He was very encouraging. Whereas our managers have always been like, oh yeah, we'll get there, and they've never seen that same. And the one thing I mentioned in previous Euros is the pride wearing that shirt. Like for me, if England players come out and they just gave 110% and showed that pride, blood, sweat and tears, Terry Butcher kind of thing, yes, you need tactical now, so the rest of it, but just showing a bit of effort. The one thing I loved about watching Wales is every player ran themselves into the ground, whether they were a championship player, League One, you know what I mean, a world-class player like Bale, they all played for that shirt like it was the last time they're ever going to play for him again. And that's one thing I love massively about Wales.
Do you think that was because it's one of the few opportunities that Wales did get to go into a tournament? Like with England, we kind of take it for granted. Like I say, it's kind of our arrogance, if anything. Do you think that plays a part in it, the fact, or do you just think that, you know, Wales are just more proud to play for the country, so to speak?
I don't know. I'm not going to try, you know, I'm proud to be a Welshman. I can't imagine, you know, we're recording this on St. George's Day. I'm sure there's plenty of Englishmen. Plenty of proud Englishmen, and, you know, it doesn't make them. I think you look through the core group of players. I'd take someone as Chris Gunter, who's an absolute, you know, 67 caps there at the point of the Euros. He's gone on to be the first Welsh man to win 100 caps. In 2007, he was getting on the supporters' buses and going to watch Wales. You know, he went through, you know, when I think Mark Hughes left and Toshak came in the early 2000s, a lot of senior players retired, and you had this sort of glut of young players, Gunter, Ledley, Bale, Ramsey starting to come through, and we went through some, you know, particularly dark times, not even getting anywhere near qualifying for a tournament. So I think to get there eventually, they had that experience behind them. They've been through tough times. They went there, and I won't go as far as to say a lad's holiday, but those experiences brought them together as a group, and this, you know, that squad togetherness, and they just went and they enjoyed it. You know, you watch any of the Welsh press conferences, or, you know, you mentioned Coleman, he was brilliant, so positive. You know, they said I think it was after there'd been the trouble with England and Russia fans, what's your message to Wales fans? And, you know, you can imagine a Hodgson or an England manager, you know, playing it, you know, be sensible. And he went, enjoy it. We've waited 57 years for this. Enjoy the experience. The way Bale and Ramsey handled the press before the England game, just had a laugh with it. I think, you know, England, I think Joe Hart wouldn't even tell them who'd won a pool tournament, would he? He was too scared to give the press that, and it just that creates that friction. And how are you going to enjoy that if you fear what the press is going to say? So yeah, there's a pride in there for playing for Wales, and I think the level of some of those players, they don't get to play with a Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey every week. You know, they lifted their level, so the playing for your country and playing with those sort of players brought them up to a level. And you look back and it was kind of a, you know, everything, the stars aligned, and it was probably, well, I'd be very surprised if the Welsh national team gets that far again. It probably was the kind of the peak for a lot of them in their careers.
I just want to say one thing. I don't think we will ever have a squad that includes a player from Real Madrid and Inverness Caledonian Thistle.
Well,
like, that's not right. It is right.
And Owen Fon Williams, and, you know, goalkeepers, you know, usually you look at Wayne Hennessy, 57 caps, Danny Ward, a handful, Owen Fon Williams, 1. But in terms of the culture that first Gary Speed and then Chris Coleman created, was despite that, and he knew he was never going to get a game, he turned up every camp. I know that's a really kind of cliche thing to say, but Wales before, their players wouldn't turn up and they'd pull out at the slightest kind of
mainly Man U players.
Yeah. And it all just created, like I say, that togetherness. Now there is more competition for players, but there wasn't many people I can think, or anyone who I can think of, that missed out on that squad. But there's just a real togetherness about it. I think that was the big thing that ran through it all.
Andy, Andy mentioned there Gary Speed. How much of a part did Gary Speed have on this squad team, the journey that they were on?
He took over from Toshak. Historically done some really impressive things as a club manager, and fair play to him. He played his part in giving the likes of Gunter and Ledley and people our international experience. I think what Gary Speed did, and the players have spoken about this, is he sounds a real odd thing to say about international football. He professionalized it. He brought this sort of the players spoke about when you went on internationals, it was like taking a step back because of the medical facilities, the training wasn't as good, and it felt like we're proud to go and play for Wales, but we're not given the things we need to succeed. He brought that in. He really took it up to a level to give these players the chance to succeed. We were doing. The style of play changed under him. Toshak was, very slow, quite a European, continental style of play. The style of play was changing. The results were coming. Confidence was growing, and obviously, tragically, he was taken from us, and it was kind of where to go from there. Coleman came in, thought, I don't want to come in and change things. He was sort of really good mates with Gary Speed. I think there was he really struggled at the start. The players struggled to just deal with the manager dying. It's as plain and simple as that. And I think Coleman, we got hammered somewhere in a qualifying. He just went, you know what? I've tried to honour Speedo's memory by doing it the way he did it. I've got to now make the changes and do the way I want to do it. And if I fail, then I failed to do it that way. And yeah, he took it on. But Gary Speed laid a lot of that groundwork in just in building some sort of belief and pride again in coming to play for Wales, I think.
Mm-hmm. Simpson, did you have a question, Matt?
It was just going to be, since then, has the expectation levels risen now with Wales, with the press and again the media, and are they expected now to probably kick on and maybe make tournaments year in year, every couple of years now?
Yeah, and the players are driven that, to be honest. And as people like Bale and Ramsey are like, yeah, we qualified. It's fantastic. We all enjoyed Euro 2016, but let's not have that as the only thing we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The World Cup qualifiers, we kind of, I think the expectation or how other teams treated us, we went from being a kind of almost out of nowhere to qualifying. We found that more difficult and adapting to that. And, Coleman's style of play of being quite, defensive, hard to beat, and then trying to get a goal on the break with some of the quality we've got, didn't lend itself to perhaps going and achieving those things. I think the expectation from the more long-suffering Welsh fan is, yes, we've got the talent to probably go and qualify for a couple more tournaments, particularly while Bale and Ramsey and Joe Allen are around, and some of the young players we've got coming through. So, there feels like these next two tournaments, obviously Euros now, hopefully the next World Cup, and maybe even the Euros beyond that, that's going to be kind of hopefully a bit of a golden era that stretches beyond one tournament. But I think there's still a realisation that we went so long without qualifying. It's not easy. There's a reason we went that long without qualifying. Yeah, the quality of the players, but it's not an easy thing to do. So, hopefully it's the start of something and not just the one thing that I'll still be talking about in another 20 years' time.
Yeah. I feel you, mate. Jamaica, France, 98. That's literally it. But no, we're going back to the facilities as well. It's the same thing with Jamaica at the moment. We haven't currently called up Leon Bailey, which is by far the best Jamaican player we've had since Theodore Whitmore. But we don't call them up because we have to pay them. And each player has a different ranking of how much they get paid. So Leon Bailey, there's another lad across in Germany has been called up as well, just because they can't afford to ship him over to Jamaica, and the facilities are shocking, literally shocking. Bailey had to bring his own physio last time. So, like I said, it's a thing where you want a country to kick on afterwards, and nah, I know what you mean. Jamaica are a little bit far behind, even from Wales, to be fair. But yeah, we've had similar things over the years where it's like we've qualified and that was it. And then once we qualified, we called up half the championship. The original Jamaican lads who qualified didn't get in the squad, and they called up half the championship and brought like Dion Burton and all sorts up. So
Robbie Earl, I remember Robbie Earl.
Are you finding that with Wales now? Are you finding that some players who may have Welsh parents, stuff like that, are now switching their allegiances across because of that tournament and thinking, no, I can actually make it with Wales instead of holding that, waiting for England and stuff like that? And how do you feel about them players that do that as well?
I think that's that before. And there's a guy called Brian Flynn, whose name you might recognise, used to manage Swansea and Wrexham, was involved in the sort of the youth setup with Wales and did a lot of scouting for players who have Welsh heritage, grandparents, whoever it might be. You know, Ashley Williams is the captain there. He's a Brummie. But for me, if he or anyone chooses to play for Wales, then, you know, it doesn't really, you know, listen to me. I spent my life growing up in England. You wouldn't, you know, but I'm a proud Welshman. So if that's what people want to do, and they've got, you know, the one I think of who doesn't perhaps do it, Paul Dummett. It feels like he got called up once, and he just doesn't seem to have the same kind of.
He's been robbing a living for years, mate.
Well, yeah.
Don't even worry about that.
You know, you think of so there was that sort of started to happen, and then now if you look towards the next generation, Ethan Ampadu, David Brooks, people like that. Yeah, they've seen a pathway. Of course they have, and I think that, you know, the young players who. Again, going back to Gunter and that sort of, they've seen how they've come through, and they go, well, there's a pathway for me there to get to the first team. You think of if David Brooks was English, he would be playing in the under-21s possibly, you know, and now he's playing full international football and is probably a starter when he's fit, you know, and will probably be a key player for us in the Euros. So it definitely plays a part, but I think that they're not just doing that for I don't know, tokenism or to tick something off. I think there is still a genuine pride about playing for Wales as well, which is, of course, important.
Yeah.
So moving on, we are going to look at the England group games.
I thought we'd avoided this then.
Yeah, no, I thought we'd get this one out of the way first. We'll just quickly mull through this. Obviously, the only team we actually managed to beat was actually Wales.
So technically, we made the semi-finals.
Yeah. So obviously, we drew the first game with Russia 1-1. We drew the third game with Slovakia, I want to say, 0-0. And so Ty, I just want your thoughts on the England team.
I mean, the first thing I'm looking at that is the amount of changes that Southgate made from that team, you know, as he moved on, and it's a very sort of stubborn way that Harry Kane, that Roy Hodgson had his team set up. It might not always be 4-4-2, but if it was 4-3-3, it was a really defensive 4-3-3.
Yeah.
Look at the defenders; they're very you look at the centre halves, Cahill and Smalling. They're not ball playing centre halves, and this is just 4 or 5 years ago when pretty much every country in the world was playing out from the back, and it was the way known. That's the way we play. Southgate identified that straight away. So Smalling doesn't play. He's gone with the Spurs fullbacks at the time. They both obviously don't play for them as well. I mean, the fact he's got Wayne Rooney in midfield. I mean, I'm looking back now. I'm like, fucking hell. My mate works at Derby County, and he says he's obviously the manager. So when he was playing there, even sort of a couple of years ago when he came back from America, he was playing in midfield, but he wasn't good enough at championship level. Mm-hmm. So in his head, I don't know what. I mean, Hodgson probably. I can imagine what he was thinking. He's probably thinking, I'm going to, play him a bit deeper, have more time in the ball, be able to spray the ball around. Because England didn't really have a ball-playing midfielder, and it was just trying to sort of stick him in. You look at you've got Sterling and Kane who are obviously still about. Lallana's not really a wide midfielder. He's more of a central midfielder, an attacking midfielder. And we talk about England's team being unbalanced. I still feel that's quite unbalanced, like in wide areas especially. And obviously with Rooney playing in middle, it just doesn't add up at all. Whereas you just compare it to the Welsh team, they seem to have a way of playing. This is what we're going to play. We've got our five at the back. We've got our creative forwards, a creative midfield, and obviously Bale. And Robson kind of was brilliant for him. We'll talk about it later, but I was watching back and looking at the goal against Belgium when he did the Cruyff turn and he sent the whole stadium wrong way. And I watched
Michael Jackson did.
I know. I was like, shit, did he just do that?
Spin move.
but yeah, so no, but England, you know, you look at that, you've got some poor players in that. I mean, you look at the triangle of Cahill, Smalling, and Dyer. That is like, I don't want to say it, but it's shit, innit? It's not international quality.
It's the best way to describe it, yeah.
Usually you can say, like, we've got a strong 11 and then maybe you can bring someone on, but you're right, that 11 is quite ridiculous. With the formation itself, I notice in tournaments we tend to stick with the same formations. We don't actually play the game. Like, we're set in our ways. We're England, we're arrogant. When I was doing this and I'm going through the Welsh formations, they seem to adapt to the games that they were actually playing. So obviously noticed the strengths and weaknesses of the other team and just adapted, whereas we just seem so arrogant in the way that we want to play. Simpson, your thoughts on this squad?
For us, Royce did a Scooby-Doo job on us. You know, when they unveiled the person at the end. He didn't play 4-3-3. He told the papers he was going to do it. What he did, he played Sterling on the left, Lam on the right. He played Dele Alli and Eric Dyer in centre midfield, and Rooney was up top with Kane. He did a 4-4-2. We just didn't realise. That's what he did. And then we realised towards the end, but Iceland did us with it. You know what I mean? I mean, for me, like Ty said, there's no balance there really at all with it. I mean, Eric Dyer, like I said, we tried it with Owen Hargreaves a few years ago. They tried to make him thinking, oh yeah, we've got an English pearl over here. Don't even try that. It's Smalling, Cahill, yeah, they're solid, but that's about it really. You know what I mean? My 5-year-old daughter, she's solid at the back, and you know, she's only started playing 2 months ago. Danny Rose and Walker, yeah, attacking fullbacks, but again, that's it. Dele Alli, yeah, there was a lot of hype about him back then, and like I say, he's gone backwards a bit. I do feel sorry for like the likes of Kane and Sterling and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, you can't really see it. Like you say, when Germany goes wrong with Germany, for example, they'll just go, right, scrap it, let's start, and this is the team we're going to build from here. With that there, you've got half of them that are on the way out, half of them that are just coming in. It was one of them tournaments where you're thinking, right, well, let's go as far as we can and get the young ones a bit of experience. And that's what it seemed like, to be fair, unfortunately.
I mean, the really interesting point as well is if you look at the England team, there's going to be pretty much 3 players that are going into the squad, into this. So it's Kane, Sterling, and Walker. I'm not on about the starting 11, I'm on the actual squad. Yeah. So 3 players from the starting 11 are going in like for next tournament. Now, that's a huge drop-off, and it probably shows he was very stubborn in the players that he picked and chose as well. Because these players were about in 2016, but he was just really stubborn with it. Like, I'm going to go with this. This is what I want to play with. This is the formation, and very sort of rigid, typical Hodgson style of play. And it obviously came to fruition against Iceland, didn't it?
Absolutely. Andy, any thoughts on that, Paul?
I just remember the chant of obviously one of the chants of the tournament, particularly when you're out there, was "Will Griggs on fire." The kind of the sort of counter chant to that was Kane's taking corners. Your defense is terrified. You know, you look at that and you go, who is Rooney? You know, England's record goal scorer, but you want Kane in the. I know talking corners here, and it's by the by, but decisions like that make you really question. And like you say, it's a very stubborn thing to do, but there's nothing, look back now at the time and when you compare it to our team in that game, and to be fair, that 2-1 game, you battered us. Absolutely. It was like the Alamo. Sterling missed a sitter, as he can often do quite early on. Walker was bombing down that right-hand side all afternoon, and you just thought we're just going to hang on. Bale scored that free kick, which Joe Hart kind of helped on in off the post. But there's nothing there in that England team that you look at and go, that would make you think that they should have gone on to do any more than they did, as we've already said. And Bale got asked before the England game, would any of the England team get in the Welsh team? And he said with a joke, and you wouldn't expect him to say anything else, no. And actually, I think, who would I take from that England team if certainly in the formation that we're playing? And I'm struggling. I might probably take Kyle Walker as a more attacking option as a right back.
You can have any if you want. You can have them all if you want.
But there's nothing. There's nothing to get overly excited about. Is
just going to that Will Griggs thing. I remember his heat map. It was just next to the bench, wasn't it?
We stayed in a hostel in Paris between the first game and the third game, and then travelled by train to Lens. So we were on the bottom floor of this hostel next to the bar, and honestly, for 5 nights until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, Will Griggs on fire hourly and every nation that was going. I think Sweden played Italy while we were there. The Republic were there, Wales, England. Oh, man. And yeah, I don't know, he played for the first 2 games at least.
It's probably an STD, that's why he was on fire.
Speaking of the chant, I remember there was one, I think it might have been birthed at that tournament, because I distinctly remember it being at that tournament. It was, I just don't want to go to work.
Don't take me home. Yeah. It was, I think it might have started by, might be Newcastle fans who started it, and then a bit of England. Yeah, we were in Bordeaux the night before the first game, and it started, and you're like, I was like listening and going, and then that was just, and Wales since on the back of it, there was sort of a bit of a documentary film made, and it was called "Don't Take Me Home." Yeah, and it was just so apt, particularly for us. I think that this first experience and all that, and we did drink a lot of beer, to be fair. So I think there was an article in L'Equipe. Is that the right? Have I said that right? Yeah. He said, the Wales fans are sort of loud, oft sometimes rowdy, but largely peaceful, and they seem to hold their beer better than some other countries, which I think was a French swipe at the English, which doesn't take a lot, does it? But one of the memories of the tournament, definitely.
Yeah, so we obviously finished second in the group at the end.
Did you?
I'm not even gonna look at the last game, because we've got Bertrand at left back, Klein at right back. We're just gonna move on to.
That's Slovakia's greatest ever team, though. We played.
It's still, we played Russia in that last game, and we played them off the park. We started really well, and you're like, how did England draw with these? But. Mm-hmm. Yeah, first game when Hennessy the night before, being Wales' number one, hardly misses a game. Back spasm, Danny Ward comes in. Joe Ledley, our starting 11 was so solid through that qualifying. I think Joe Ledley broke his leg 5 weeks before the tournament, and wow. His recovery to just get there was ridiculous. But I talk about those players who can come in and do a job, and Dave Edwards is in that category. But yeah, that's that Slovakia game. We started a bit edgy. Ben Davies cleared one off the line after about 4 minutes. Hamsik sent a couple of players for he did a bit of Robson Kanu on a couple of players, and then Bale scored that free kick. And honestly, it was when I said I wanted to see a goal that meant something. Whatever it was, 15 minutes in. Wow, what a moment that was to see that goal.
It's always a relief when the big players actually show up to the tournament, and obviously your guys in particular. I distinctly remember Aaron Ramsey having a particularly good tournament. Who impressed you the most from your squad?
All the hype was about Bale, of course it was, and he won the Champions League, I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the tournament kicked off. But Ramsey at times can be frustrating, because he's got it in him, and I suppose he plays in that role where he's trying to create things. He's probably more likely to give the ball away because he's trying to make things happen. But he is a big game player, and I think all the attention on Bale. I listened to another podcast, Ellis James's Feast of Football, and Danny Gabidon's on there. I think came through. Was at Cardiff when maybe Ramsey was coming through, and he said, whilst he wouldn't be jealous of Bale's attention, he would be like, what, I'm going to show them what I'm about.
Yeah.
And you don't bleach your hair blonde and go to a tournament and don't show up. And yeah, him, Joe Allen. I spoke with Ty about Joe Allen, and his spell at Liverpool was a bit, he didn't perhaps hit the heights that they thought, but he just kept us ticking over, fitted into the system brilliantly. James Chester, again, talk about players rising to a level that you perhaps didn't think they were capable of. When he pulled on a Wales shirt, he was so reliable and played brilliantly. So I'm going to try not to list the whole team, but Alan Ramsey in particular, and then James Chester was excellent as well.
Do you know the thing with Wales I always found was that, you've mentioned it before, and you talk about the difference between England, where they've got better players. That tournament, it just embodied the importance of having like a club culture, a team culture. That they felt like 11 mates that they were playing together, and it felt like a club. Whereas England played like an international team that meet up once every 4 months, you know what I mean? And then you look at that team, that's a solid 11. It's a good 11, you know, and they probably reached the absolute peak where they could, which was a semi-final in the end. But I think the performances throughout the group's really good. I remember that the goal that I remember was the Aaron Ramsey when he goes through and he dinks it over the keeper. Yeah, I mean, there was some real quality on show. Obviously, Bale's got a few free kicks on the way as well.
Well, that Russia game, we went into it and we knew they were obviously an aging back four. And I don't know what the combined age was, but particularly the centre halves were about 38 each, weren't they? So we were like, well, you know, he's going to play Robson Kanu. He probably played maybe Johnny Williams or, I don't know, I made light of it earlier, but someone like Simon, you know, really go at them with pace. And he kind of took us all by surprise, Coleman, and started Vokes for the first time. But what that did was it occupied those two centre halves. Because they were, you know, I think Ty, you've played centre half, and I've done it. I've played a little bit. You want someone up against you because it's an easy out. Then, you know, I'll go and mark up against him. They played a ridiculously high line, considering you know the likes of Ramsey running from deep. I mean, Neil Taylor. I watched him for Swansea for years. He couldn't cross his fingers and never looked like scoring, and he scored, found himself in the box in acres of space. And yeah, that the Ramsey goal, I think that you mentioned, Joe Allen picked it up and just played a brilliant ball through that sliced the defence open. And he got through and cool as you like, dinked it over, and off we go. And it was, for about 10 days, the best Welsh performance I'd ever seen.
It was great, that blonde day. I thought one of the dudes from E17 had gone clean through. I was like, what was going on here? But yeah, no, it was definitely a different class. Was there like a fear of like burnout eventually? Because obviously you have to stick with the 4 or 5 amazing players you've got, and like you said, like Dave Edwards came in, did a job. But was there a fear eventually, like I said, they would burn out? And do you feel like when they got towards the knockout phase, could you see them fatiguing a bit, or was any of that?
The only time where it felt like it had caught up with us was when we went 2-0 down in the semi-final. You know, the North, we genuinely thought, once we got the result in the first game, given that most, you know, a lot of third place teams were going to go through, we thought we got a good chance now of getting through. But we never, you know, getting out of the group was bonus. The Northern Ireland game was might consider a bit of a non-event. We never felt like, you know, if anything, we grew and we got better, and it was just another experience and another, you know, these players they're fans like us, as corny as it sounds. You know, in the week there's been talking a lot about football players as fans. I think they'd grown up watching and wanting to see Wales in a major tournament, and here they were playing in it. If you can't get up for that and have your adrenaline going, and not, you know, you're not going to be tired in a 4-week tournament, or 3-4 week tournament. Yeah. So no, until that very end, where I just think it was just, yeah, we'll probably come to the semis, but no, we didn't know fear of burnout, I think.
And going back to that Northern Ireland one, so was that the one game where you thought, actually, the pressure's on us, we're favourites to win this game out of all the games we've played?
We spoke about what were expectations at the start of the tournament, and yeah, at the start of the tournament, I didn't have any. You go into that game where you've topped a group with, you know, I know and England should have won that group, really. You know, for all we said about Scotland, they should have, you know, they beat us, and Slovakia were decent with Hamsik, and Russia were dire. And yeah, you got to that, and you kind of thought in that game, it's the first time that we kind of went, oh, hang on. After such the experience we've had in the groups, if we lose to, with all due respect, Northern Ireland, who were similar in style to us, and they set up to be difficult to beat, and will try and nick a goal. You know, they didn't have a Bale or a Ramsey in their team, so I think that was probably a time where we kind of, you know, hang on, we're favourites here. We're very rarely favourites.
The better 11, didn't you? On paper, the better 11 than Northern Ireland. On paper.
Yeah, we're very rarely favourites in a game, despite a couple of the players that we've got. So yeah, there was a fear of it would be a bit of a damp squib to end after the journey we've had, but yeah, thankfully that wasn't the case. But we won't need to talk about that game for too long because not too much happened.
With you guys finishing top, but you played the third place? Was it third place from another group?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think you would have felt comfortable with playing against Iceland if you finished top of the group anyway. So, to be fair. But before we move on to that game, you obviously went out to the tournament. Did you have an expectation of how long you planned on staying out there, and did it actually extend longer than you thought?
I wish it had. I think we started to look again at when semi-final time came around. After the quarters, we were me and my brother were like what do we do here? Do we go out for the semis maybe, but then we're like, if we paid to go out for the semis and we got to the final and then got no money left to get to the final, we'll kick ourselves. I mean, it's a
yeah.
So no, we always planned, let's go out for the group, thinking quite feasibly that would be as far as we'd get. So we went out for the 10 days. My brother did home and away to Wales for 3 or 4 years. So he, that's how we got the tickets, because he was there home and away and the whole qualification tournament. So we went out for 10 days, started off in Bordeaux, a couple of nights there, stayed in Paris, which I'm sure it's lovely if you've got a romantic break. I didn't think too much of it, if I'm honest, as a city for 5 days.
Bunk beds.
Yeah, and the hostel experience might not have helped. Lons as a place to hold an England-Wales game, man, not the place. I can't think of an English sort of equivalent town to the whole city to hold it, and it didn't have the facilities for it. So yeah, we went out for the 10 days, flew back. So we played Russia on obviously the night. As this background for anyone who's clearly been wondering through the whole episode is the stadium at Toulouse after the full-time whistle. We had to get up at 5 o'clock to go and get our flight back. So we went back and just cloud nine. I had to go and sit in the office then for a couple of weeks, for trying to think about everything else apart from work with what's going on. So yeah, there was never any plans to go back out, but as it got further on, we did consider it. But yeah, didn't get that far.
So these are the final groups. I've highlighted the home nations in green. Let's not forget Northern Ireland, and Ireland did actually participate in the tournament, and they did actually get to the last 16, which I think everybody got to practically. And also you can see there Portugal, the eventual winners, with 3 draws. Is there anything that stands out to you guys?
Yeah, for me, I remember when Portugal qualified, and obviously they won it, and they're talking about they went through the group stages without winning a game. Any other normal tournament, they wouldn't have qualified. And Italy, obviously from my point of view, Conte was in charge at the time and playing his sort of normal 3-5-2. It wasn't a great Italian team, but they, with Italy, you always know when they turn up that they'll perform. They'll play to a level where they'll get to the later stages of the tournament. And they can win it if things sort of fall their way. And I remember Spain as well. This was a sort of time where it just sort of, we talk about the greatest international team of our generation. And this was probably the tournament where they were slowly, surely, just sort of
on the decline.
Go of that mantle. And I was watching the highlights. I know Iniesta was still playing, and he was still tearing it up, But in general, it was just more teams in it. Obviously, compared to our previous ones, 24 teams. So there's 2 extra groups.
Yeah, the Spain seemed to be lacking forwards. I know they obviously played with the false 9 in the previous tournament that we talked about, but I think they had Nolito. Was it Nolito?
And Negredo as well.
Negredo. Yeah. So they're not exactly names that stand out. So just a quick question on Italy's group tie. Who did they actually get beat by?
If I'm not right, was it Ireland? Did Ireland beat them?
Yeah, they did 1-0. Yeah, they had to win. It was the last game.
Yeah,
it was the last game to qualify. Yeah,
it only qualified.
Yeah, Ireland scored in the last minute. It was Ireland who scored in the last minute, so that they qualified in 3rd place and managed to get to the next round. Simpson, thoughts on the groups, Paul?
Again, you're looking at that and you're thinking you're not looking at any past further than Germany and France, especially where Portugal played. Italy, again, like you said, they weren't the greatest team, but Italy will always be there or thereabouts towards the end. Croatia, again, I mean, I'm amazed. Every Euros we've done, Croatia seemed to always, I don't want to say overachieve, but you consider the size of the country, and they have got quality players, but they always seem to do so well in tournaments. So again, they won their group. But Hungary, I mean, I honestly couldn't name you one Hungry player, to be honest. I really couldn't.
Zoltan Gera.
Oh, here we go. Yeah,
I can't remember he scored a goal against, but he scored a screamer, didn't he? But
left Pegasus, that guy. Yeah, but I mean, again, it's like, I mean, once the groups have been done there, you're thinking France probably favourites there. Then you got your Germans, but again, Germans are led by Mario Gomez. Ronaldo's been disappointing so far. Portugal have drawn three games. We've got some geezer called Eder up front, which obviously we'll know about later on. But again, I've seen that brother in like plenty of clubs in Leeds and stuff like that. But other than that, doing a 2-step, other than that, I've never seen him before. But yeah, it did surprise me. But at that stage, back then, I'm thinking, yeah, you're looking France, Germany, Italy. They've won the group. They're probably going to kick on as long as they avoid each other. Belgium, we're starting to get that squad together. Look, I mean, like now I probably put Belgium as favourites to the next Euros. They're getting that squad together. But yeah, I'm surprised at the outcome of what happened eventually, especially with France anyway as well.
So Spain were the holders of this competition. The World Cup holders at that time, would that be Germany?
2014, yeah, it would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
2014 was Germany, yes, 2010 Spain. Yeah, that would be Germany. Yeah.
So they're obviously flying. Andy, I just want to ask you, I've not had the fortune of being at a major tournament before. Do you manage to actually catch many of the other games, many of the other teams while you're
there? What did we do? So first night we were there, it was the opening game, France against Romania, and Payet scored that absolute screamer in the last minute to win it 2-1. So we were sort of watching that, but we were out on the street in a bar. In fact, we thought the game had finished 1-1, and then some French people came walking through and told us they'd won 2-1. Went to a fan park in Paris, which was sort of essentially you had the Eiffel Tower, a big screen, and then that in front of you. So we picked up bits of it. Was it Hungary and Portugal had like a 3-3?
Yes.
Remember that? I think we went, me and my brother, looking for sort of something to do before our game, and went to watch Toulouse's rugby league team play Keighley Cougars. And we were sort of stood where we could see a TV, so we were sort of watching that game through there. So yeah, you pick up a lot, and we, like I said, particularly in Paris, we were there for 5 days. You saw lots of fans from different teams, and that was a really good, experience. Yeah. And the majority of them could speak English, which was, kind of when you talk about that. I don't know if it's an arrogance, but we always expect that everyone else will speak English, and it was just that kind of thing. And people wanted to talk to us. People come up to, like, German fans come up to us talking to Wales fans, yeah, and yeah, just all adds to the experience, doesn't it? And then they get.
Andy, you mentioned there about speaking to other fans. Did you meet and speak to other English fans?
Yes. Yeah.
And how was that? Were they all right? And obviously, what I'm getting at is obviously there was a lot of issues around fans, especially the Russia game with the Russian fans as well. The police were involved and stuff like that. Did you see any of that? How were they with you?
When we were in Paris, there was first fans said no, didn't see any trouble. I think we spoke to some England fans who had been in Marseille, wasn't it, for the Russia game, and it sounded terrifying. Some of the stuff they were saying, let's be honest. There was always that fear that Wales, England, there was going to be, we hadn't played England for however long, and somewhere like Lens wasn't really cut out for what you might need, but there was an edge to it. You could feel an edge a little bit in the strip, but there was similarly, we walked off, got off the train, and the first bar came to loads of England fans outside, and you're like, not then they weren't like looking, we've all been to games, you go, I think I'll avoid him. There was nothing like that. But we walked past, and every time a group of Welsh fans walked past, they just sort of shh, and you're like, oh God, here we go. Then as we started walking past, they just went, en masse, just went, meh. And it kind of broke, and yeah, so there was a good sort of a banter between that, but there was some groups of people who looked at and went, I'm not going to stay in this bar with them there, but we didn't see any bother. Knew a couple of England fans that are out there wasn't any. I think the Russians came intent on doing what they did, didn't they? So
just to go on from that, Andy, the rivalry between England and Wales, obviously, I don't know rugby well, but I presume that's a bit of a fierce rivalry. What would you say the relationship is from a Wales to England perspective? I'm not one of these fans who wishes ill will against Scotland or anything like that. For me, I'd rather have all the home nations in a tournament doing well. If we're up against you, obviously I'd rather you win. But if we get knocked out, I'm supporting the home nations. What's the rivalry like from a Welsh perspective towards the English?
I'd say I don't imagine many England fans would consider Wales as a rival because we've been such a non-event in international football for so long. Yeah, you're right. The big rivalry in the rugby because we can compete with England, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years. I think for all the other home nations other than England, we probably got, I don't know, is it little brother syndrome, bit of a chip on the shoulder, You're not going to find many Welsh, Scottish or Irish people willing England on if they got knocked out, if they were knocked out of a tournament, and you'd probably go, well, it's a bit petty, or it's just You know, if you think about it, I don't know, Ty, you're a Liverpool fan. If Liverpool get knocked out of the Champions League, are you willing on Man United?
That's different.
No,
do you know what I mean?
That's different.
No.
Yeah,
No.
So yeah, I think there's a and I think there was almost when we lost to England, seeing that you celebrate any last minute winner, of course you do, but that kind of disappointment only lasted like 15, 20 minutes, and we were like, you know, we've held our own against England in a major tournament, you know, and I know it's not, I'm sure it wasn't from you guys, it's genuine and sincere wanting the home nations to do well, but sometimes that can almost feel like a bit of a pity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want Wales and Scotland to do well. It wouldn't it be nice if they're there too? Kind of like, wouldn't it be good for them?
Yeah.
So to be on that same stage and to compete was nice. But there is a rivalry, but it's probably only one way. And now when I see after Euro 2016 England fans suddenly tweeting about Wales again, it's like, you know what? England fans actually care about what we're doing now for a little bit. I will take that. So.
Yeah, we were talking about expectation earlier, and you were talking about your own expectation. After this tournament, my own personal expectation of Wales was a lot higher, like to qualify for a lot of the the future tournaments and that. So, yeah, I think
hopefully we've had to change our style, like I said, because the other nations that we come up against suddenly were European Championship semi-finalists. They're not going to come out at you and allow you to play on the counter-attack with people like Gareth Bale in the team. You know, that's what we did before. You know, be hard to break down. And then we've got one world-class player and another top-quality player in the final third who can hurt you when the time comes. Teams then were like, actually, we were suddenly top or second seeds in our group. And we had to adapt our style of play. And I think that's perhaps why ultimately Coleman perhaps left, was that he probably took it as far as he could in that style.
See you later, guys.
See you later, guys.
Cheers.